Imagine this for a second. You're trapped on a plane 35,000 feet up in the air.
You're on one of those really long-haul flights, just settling in for what you think is going to be a pretty routine trip. You've got 13 hours ahead of you and absolutely nowhere to go.
And then the unthinkable happens. A fellow passenger dies. But the plane, it doesn't turn back. There's no emergency landing. And this isn't some hypothetical situation. This is the true story of one very, very long flight.
So today, we're going to break down the story of a British Airways flight where a passenger's death led to a truly extraordinary decision to keep on flying for more than 12 hours with the deceased still on board. It all starts out like any other long trip, a standard, fully booked international flight, getting ready for takeoff. Everything seems completely 100% normal.
The flight we're talking about is a British Airways journey from Hong Kong to London Heathrow, and that is a marathon trip, usually clocking in somewhere between 13 and 14 hours.
But just 1 hour into the flight, that routine is completely shattered. A woman in her 60s suffers a sudden, really critical medical emergency. The crew responds immediately, but despite doing everything they can, she passes away. The unimaginable has just happened, thousands of feet up in the air.
And that, right there, leads to the most crucial part of this story, the decision that was made next. A decision that, when you first hear it, seems to go against every single instinct.
I mean, the immediate question on pretty much everyone's mind is, why didn't they land, right? Why not just turn back to Hong Kong or divert to the nearest airport?
And this is where aviation protocol becomes so important. A diversion is an emergency measure, but its main purpose is to save a life. Once a death has been confirmed, well, as tragic as it is, there's no life left to save. And from a procedural standpoint, the whole situation changes.
So now the captain has to weigh a whole new set of factors. They have to think about the distance to the nearest airport that can even handle a jet that big, the safety risks of an unscheduled landing, and the huge logistical mess it would create for hundreds of other people. With saving a life no longer on the table, the call was made to continue on to London.
And that decision kicked off the next, incredibly challenging chapter, having to manage a deeply sensitive and difficult situation for the rest of the flight. Another 12 hours.
Now, what made all of this even harder was that the plane was completely full. Every seat was taken. There are no empty rows, no private cabins. There was simply no designated space to handle something like this with any real privacy.
So the crew had to fall back on their training. They respectfully covered the body, and in a just heartbreaking turn, they also had to attend to the grieving family who were on the flight as well. They then moved the body to the only semi-private space they had, the rear galley, the area where flight attendants prepare all the meals.
But this is where they ran into a grim, totally unforeseen problem that came from the plane's own design. The galley floor was heated, and over the many, many hours left in the flight, this reportedly created a very unpleasant and distressing environment, a horrifying consequence that no procedure could have ever planned for.
And this just shows you the human toll. I mean, protocols are one thing, but the reality for the crew was trying to do their normal jobs while a profound tragedy was unfolding just feet away. They were serving meals, ensuring passenger safety, all while dealing with what they called an emotionally overwhelming situation. So, after 12 more hours in the air under these impossible circumstances, what happens when the plane finally lands?
After nearly 13 hours total, the flight touched down at Heathrow. But before any passengers could get off, police and medical personnel boarded the plane and took over the situation with this kind of quiet professionalism. For everyone on board, it was the end of a flight they would never, ever forget.
An incident like this, as shocking as it is, it really forces the entire aviation industry to kind of step back and look at the bigger picture.
First, it's really important to understand that this is an extremely rare event. While medical emergencies do happen on flights, actual fatalities are incredibly uncommon. This just isn't something crews deal with on a regular basis.
But just because it's rare doesn't mean it can be ignored. This case really forced the industry to ask some tough questions. Are the current guidelines enough? And how do you create a global standard for managing death with dignity at 35,000 feet?
And that leaves us with a final thought. And it's an uncomfortable question for sure, but a necessary one. If you were on that flight, what would you expect? It forces us to confront these really complex human realities that exist even in the most controlled places, reminding us that sometimes there's really nowhere to go but forward.